Here's what's important to remember. Your story is connected to a person. It's not just a story that you're sharing, but it's a person's story that you're sharing. Okay? You're not using this person just to fill a moment in your worship experience or on the weekend or online just to make a video. I mean, you're celebrating what God has done in this person's life. So if you do this correctly, you're going to establish a relationship with this person. Lee and I have a relationship now. I would say Lee and I are friends. Before this whole thing, we weren't friends. I kind of knew Lee, but now we're friends who have been through something significant. When you do that, then it changes the way that you communicate and you care for the person whose story that you're sharing. Instead of just being all business about it, telling Lee what we're doing, when we're doing it, making sure that he's there, I am having a conversation with him about every part of the process. And I'm caring for him through every part. And the way that you care is by over communicating everything. You got to think about this. Lee, my lead, the person whose story I'm sharing, has no experience on set. He doesn't know what it's like to be behind or in front of a camera or for there to be light. As far as he's concerned, a Kino Flow and a shotgun mic and a C100, like that's big Hollywood to him because he doesn't have any experience. So if I don't tell him what's coming and he walks into set, it's going to be a little overwhelming. He's going to be like, whoa, I didn't realize that this was going to be this big a deal. His only experience with a camera is probably someone shooting him with their iPhone, okay? So there's going to be details that you're going to communicate before the interview to make him feel comfortable that maybe to you seem elementary, but we're caring for the person. I'm caring for Lee, right? So I'm going to do a really good job of making sure that he knows what he's walking into. So there's kind of 4 or 5 things that we want to communicate before we get here. Number one, I want to work with Lee on the date and time of the interview. So I call Lee and I say, hey, Lee, what do you think about shooting your interview at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday? Does that work for you? And he's just like, that's a great time. And I'm like, you sure you don't want to move it back to after work? Or would it be better at a lunch or a day off? And he's like, nope, that's great. That works for my schedule. That's awesome. Okay. I have to be ready if he says that doesn't work. Can you pick another time? Because I'm making him feel comfortable. I'm accommodating him. I'm caring for him. All right. This is a relationship. So we've got the time. I text him well before, this is the location. I don't want him texting me the day of, like, I forgot where that place is. That makes him scramble, that whole thing. So a couple of days before the shoot, I text him, I say, hey, we're going to shoot at this location. Here's the address and we'll see you there. Number 2, I'm going to talk to him about how long it is. Hey, Lee, it's going to be a couple of hours that we're going to shoot with you. The reason that you do that is because there's a very good chance that he is assuming an incorrect time. He's either going to think it's going to be too short or he's going to think it's going to be too long, all right? So he has no context for this world, remember? So he could very easily get here and be like, I thought this was going to be like 30 minutes. I'm sorry, guys. I promised my wife I would get home. That's going to be a terrible situation for everybody. We're not going to finish the story, and then we've got to reschedule the whole thing. That would be a nightmare. So I'm saying it's going to be about 2 hours. The other side of it is he might think it's going to be till midnight, and then that's going to adjust when he says he can do it. And so you just got to make sure that you're communicating exactly what's going to happen. We're going to talk about what Lee should wear. All right. So I don't want Lee to look like too professional, and I don't want him to look like frumpy. I want him to look good. And so I'll talk to Lee. Hey, what's something good looking and casual that you might wear? He says a button-up shirt. I'm like, great. Why don't you wear a button-up shirt? Bring a couple of options just in case a color doesn't work. Try to wear a solid color. You don't want to wear all white, but you don't want to wear like crazy patterns. That's not going to work. With women specifically in clothing, it's going to be a little different. If I'm over communicating with guys, I'm over communicating when I have females who I'm sharing their story. First thing is, girls wear jewelry. And so there's 2 things to think about with that. Number 1, you don't want them to wear just really big jewelry, anything that's distracting. So I'll just say, hey, one of the girls, I told her story, Georgiana. I'm like, hey, Georgiana, sometimes you like to wear a big necklace, but you might just think about the fact that on camera, that could be a little overpowering. So you might consider wearing a smaller one, or if you have a shirt where you don't wear a necklace or something like that, that might be a better choice. If you want to text me pictures of that's great. I'm here. I can help you out with that. That's a big deal. Number two is jewelry makes a lot of noise, especially bracelets. And so you might say, if you're wearing any loose bracelets or whatever, then those can make a lot of noise. You might not wear that. I realize that you're thinking, well, if they're wearing that and they get to set, then I'll just have them take it off. But this is part of the outfit that person chose, that makes them feel comfortable, that they feel good in. And if you take part of that away, without them, having any say, that could make them a little nervous. So tell them beforehand, let them know beforehand. And that's going to be a much better situation. It's really important that you say, hey, why don't you bring a couple of options? Because this has happened before, that the shirt someone's wearing doesn't really work. It's following the guidelines that I asked them to, but it doesn't work for whatever reason. And it's the only option we have. And so what are you doing in that situation? Well, what if the person lives 30 minutes away? That's another hour that you've got to take out of your shoot time. It's going to mess up the interview. It's going to make them nervous. That's not going to work. So something very simple. Hey, bring a couple of options with you. That's great. Do that and you're going to be good on the close. Then number 4, I think, communicate what he or she is walking into. So with Lee, I'm caring for Lee. All right. I want him to feel comfortable on set. Think about it like this. Well, you ever been to a job interview or a party or to an event, and you really didn't know what you're walking into, and you got there and you're like, oh, this is different than I expected. You get nervous. Look, you don't want your lead nervous. It's the opposite. Okay. I want Lee comfortable. I want him to be in a place internally and emotionally where he can communicate to me in a comfortable way, in a very clear way. I want him to be in a position where he feels comfortable enough to be vulnerable. And he's not going to do that if he's nervous. So I'm trying to cut that tension, doing that by saying, Lee, here's what you're getting into. When you get to the house, we're going to have a few moments for you to change your clothes, give you a moment in the restroom if you want to fix your hair or something like that, kind of freshen up. Then I'm going to have you sit down in a chair, and we're just going to have a conversation. And, I told you it's going to last a couple of hours, and it's just going to be you and me talking in that moment. And that's what our experience is going to be like. I promise I'm going to make you feel comfortable. That just kind of sets him at ease. One, because he knows I know what's going on. Okay. So if anything, follow the leader. And then number 2 is like, okay, so I know that when I get there, if I want to fix my hair or want to put on a different shirt, that's great. I know I can do that. One of the last things is let him know who's going to be on set, or at least how many people are going to be on set. You do that based on their personality. Lee's a pretty confident individual. So when I said, hey, we're gonna have camera guy, Gary's gonna be there, we got an audio person, and then Chris is gonna be there, I'm gonna be there. So we're gonna have about 4 people there. That just lets him know, again, what he's walking into. It lets him know how many people are gonna be there. And if you're shooting in the lead's house, that's really helpful and really just respectful. Like, if you're bringing a bunch of people over to my house, just let me know how many people are coming. That way I can just be ready. So don't take that for granted, that they just know, your lead just knows that crews are about 4 people, or we're going to have about 8 people, or, whatever situation you're in. Communicate that. Here is what all this is about. Over communicating. I realize a lot of these things to you seem elementary, but to your lead, it's not going to be. It's going to be helpful. It's going to be calming. It's going to give them permission to be comfortable. So if you feel like before the interview, through that whole process, you are over communicating information, then you're doing a really good job, and you are setting your lead up, your storyteller, for a really, really good interview.